If you've been hearing about Claude Code and don't know how to set it up, this is the video. You don't need to know how to code. You definitely don't need a computer science degree. I'm going to walk you through the setup in plain English so it's easy to understand if you aren't technical like me. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Claude Code is, how to set it up, what the heck an IDE is, and how to give Claude Code its first instruction. Think of Claude Code like a really smart assistant, but rather than talking to it to tell it what to do, you just type what you want and it builds it for you. That's it. In this video, we're going to cover 5 steps. And these steps might sound simple at first, but they're actually pretty involved if you are not technical like me. The first step is the easiest. We're going to create and secure you a Claude Pro subscription. Then we're going to access your system terminal. And if you don't know what a terminal is yet, don't worry, we're going to cover that. Step 3 is we're going to install Claude Code using that terminal. Step 4, we're going to authenticate and launch Claude Code onto your computer. And then step 5, we're going to upgrade you to an IDE workspace, which is a user interface that makes Claude Code so much easier to work in. Let's start. To make this video as simple to follow as possible, I created a Claude setup guide, which I will be referencing in this video, and it is free for you. So all you need to do is open it down at the link below in the description. Starting from the setup guide, we can either upgrade our Claude accounts if we have one, or we can create a Claude account. Let's create a Claude account together if you don't have one. Looking at the setup guide, you can just click on this link that I have here, Claude.ai, or you can type in Claude.ai in your browser. When you do that, your screen should look something like this. You can hit continue with Google or create an account just using your email address. When you are creating your accounts, there will be a few onboarding questions. And in those questions, it might ask you to set up your billing. So go ahead and do that and sign up for the Pro account. Pause this video here so that you can do that. If you already have an account and you want to upgrade, then let's do that together. Once you are successfully logged in to Claude, this should be your home screen. To set up your billing and upgrade your account, all you need to do in the bottom left-hand corner is hit settings. And then in settings, you can go to billing. And then in billing, this is where you will upgrade your free account to the Pro plan. We are now ready to install Claude Code. But actually, here's where this video gets a little bit interesting. When I say install Claude Code, you probably think, okay, so there's a program I need to download, install it, and then add it to my applications folder if you're on Mac. But actually, this process is going to be completely different. We need to install Claude Code in what's called the terminal. So before we actually do that, let's walk through some things together. There are 2 ways to install a program on your computer or a software, depending on what type of language you want to use. There is the traditional method that we are all familiar with. So we download the program file from our website, we open it, and then we drag that program file over to our applications if you're on Mac. This is pretty standard, and I feel like at this point in time, even my parents could install a program in this way. But when it comes to Claude Code, we actually need to install it using the terminal, which is a completely different method. You might not know what a terminal is, so let's walk through that together. If you have watched any movie where there was a crazy hacker or someone working in cybersecurity, you'll notice that they're always typing on their computer in some sort of window. But if you're not technical, like I'm not, then you never had any idea what they were using or what they were doing. Well, the terminal is just a text-based way to talk to your computer or laptop. For Claude Code, we need to install it using the terminal because it's not a traditional program like we're used to. The reason that people have to install things using the terminal versus the old way is because there are some tools that only work when using the terminal. Because there are some programs or some software that only work when installed via the terminal. And fundamentally, this is because in the traditional method, you are installing a finished programmed or piece of software. But then for the terminal, it is not finished. And these are actually ingredients that you need to execute the task that you're trying to do. Now that we know or are a little bit more familiar with what the terminal is, let's actually install Claude Code. To do this, we need to do two things. We need to open the terminal, and then we need to open up the documentation on Claude's website. First, to open the terminal, if you are on Mac, just hit Command Space and search for terminal. Your screen should look a little bit something like this. After you have the terminal open, head back on over to the setup guide and then find this link here for the Claude Code documentation. Now you have everything you need to get started. Scroll down to your operating system. So for me, I'm on Mac OS and you might be on Windows. So for those on Mac, here you can hit this copy button and then open your terminal. And all you want to do is paste this in and hit enter. Once you hit enter, Claude Code is going to spend some time to install. So let's give it a second and then come back once it's finished. By the way, after you hit enter, if you don't see anything for 30 seconds or a minute, don't worry because the request is processing and mine was the same exact way. Once you actually have that installed, this will be the screen that you see. So let's actually look through what we just did and walk through it together. By the way, I just want to take a step back really quick and say, yes, I know the terminal might be intimidating. The great news is that after we review the terminal and using Claude Code in it, we're actually going to look through a really easy way to use Claude Code in a completely different user interface that makes it more friendly to people that aren't technical like you and I. Once your screen looks like this, to activate Claude Code, all you need to do is type in Claude. And here you're going to get a question. Do you trust this program that you're trying to access? Hit enter. And once you hit enter, your screen should look exactly like this. So you'll have the welcome message and you'll have this cute little Claude bot. There are a couple of things that I want you guys to do to finish this setup. So firstly, I want you to type /status line. And what we're going to do here is enhance the user interface of what we're working with. And after we do that, then it'll be a lot easier to explain Claude Code and what it's doing and what are the important parts to understand about it. Now, it's asking me, what would you like to display in your Claude Code status line? Earlier, when I was doing this to test it for the video, it actually gave me 3 different options to choose from. And I believe the third option was give me the standard options that people normally use. If that's what your user interface looks like now, then go with that one. If it looks like mine, then let's do model name and context window usage. I know right now we are just typing buttons on our keyboard and hitting enter without maybe understanding what is exactly happening. But I promise once this is finished, we're going to walk through that step by step. But it'll only make sense if we actually are able to look at it right in front of us versus me just trying to explain or tell you without you being able to visualize what I'm saying. It is asking, do you want to make this edit? I hit yes. Do you want me to make this edit? Yes. After you have configured the status line, and your page says this, your status line is now configured, then we need to restart Claude Code. So you can go ahead and X out of the terminal and hit terminate, hit Command Space, and hit terminal. And then now let's open Claude Code back up and see if the status line was installed. Hit yes. Okay, perfect. So now every time we use Claude Code in the terminal, it tells us the model number and then also the context. But actually, it's missing one thing, which is our token usage. So let me add that. And then after we successfully do this, then I will walk you guys through an explanation. To do that, all you need to do is hit /status line again. And then from here, we will be able to tell Claude Code to add the tokens to our status line. So it looks like your shell config doesn't have a PS1 defined. So here, I'm just going to do option number 2, which is a description. And then for the description, I'm going to say add tokens, add token cost. Now Claude Code is going to run through that. So let's give it a second and then I'll join back up with you guys in a second. Awesome. Now we have added token cost to our status line. So we have three aspects that are displayed here. We have the model name, we have the context window, and then we have the estimated cost of the tokens that we're using. Now you're probably asking, Timothy, it's awesome that we did this, but what the heck does context mean? What the heck are tokens and costs? Let's go through that together. Fundamentally, tokens and context window are two very important topics when it comes to understanding and using AI. When we walk through this, keep in mind my goal in explaining these two topics to you has nothing to do with it being some sort of academic lecture where you need to study these terms because you have a test later. The more that you understand these terms, the better you'll actually be able to use models like Claude Code or ChatGPT to get better output for everything that you put in. Now, when it comes to tokens or estimated cost, this is a pretty straightforward concept. Essentially, tokens are AI's basic currency for the cost of using the platform. So for every prompt or ask that you give it, there is a cost associated to it. If we go back to our terminal, then we can see that estimated cost clearly. So for this ask that I was using Claude Code to set up our status line, that costed, I think, 4/10 of a cent. And this gives you a great view into how much you're actually spending when using these LLMs. Now, this is fundamentally important because the more that you can efficiently use tokens in AI, the better that you will get at saving money with everything that you're using. When it comes to context window, this concept is a little bit more involved. Fundamentally, the best way for you to think about it is AI has an active memory window. And this window represents the total conversation history that the AI can remember at once. So if we go back to the terminal, then we can see that of that context window, 11% was used in this current conversation that I'm engaging with. The reason that that is important is because there's a concept called context rot, where too much unnecessary information actually makes the AI's answers less accurate and helpful. If we go back to the terminal, we can always keep an eye on the amount of context that is being used so we can always make sure that we are efficiently talking with the AI when we're using it. When we think about context window, this is important because here, in the same way that efficiently managing our tokens saves us money, efficiently managing our context also does the same as well. And not only does it help us save money, but it also helps us actually use the tool better and get better answers from Claude Code or ChatGPT or whatever bot that we're using. Now that we have talked about the concept of tokens and the concept of what a context window is, let's go back to the terminal for a second. When we were reviewing the terminal earlier, if you remember, one thing I mentioned is that if you feel intimidated by the terminal, there's actually good news. And that good news is what we're going to talk about now. The terminal is not user friendly, let's be honest, especially if you are not technical. What people have developed over the past 10, 20, 30 years is a more user friendly way to use the terminal, and that is called an IDE. You're probably like, Timothy, what the heck is an IDE? And I've never heard of that term, but why is it even important for me? And please just get me out of this terminal. If that's how you feel, then stay tuned because I'm completely in the same boat as you. First, let's review what a terminal even is. The easiest way to understand this is let's just look at them side by side. So on the left-hand corner, we have the terminal, which we've been using, and that's how we set up and installed Claude Code. If you remember, the whole concept of a terminal is that it is a text-based editor. So you talk in the terminal with text. But on the right side, we have what's called an IDE. And this makes using the terminal so much easier and honestly streamlines the entire process. So if we look, there are essentially three parts of an IDE, and we're going to use a real example after this. The first part has to do with a file organizer. So currently, if we wanted to access files or folders using the raw terminal, we'd have to do that using text. And it honestly just gets really frustrating. Here's an example. I have my terminal open, and let's say I want to ask Claude Code to reference a photo that I have on my desktop. Well, we know that Claude Code can do that because it has access to our local machine, but look at how we have to reference it. We start in the terminal, and then we have to head on over to a folder that we wanted to reference. So here, I'm using this as an example, and I'm going to ask Claude Code to reference this photo here, context and tokens, which is one of the images that I reviewed with y'all earlier. To get Claude Code to actually reference this file, we have to get the path name. So first of all, I didn't even know how to do this or what the path name was before learning about the terminal in general. But let me walk y'all through it. So the path name is essentially where the file lives on your computer. So if I right click this photo, you're going to see a bunch of different options, but I don't have anything for path name. Well, if you are on Mac, what you can do is hit option, and then you'll see, whoa, I have some different options. So now what's interesting is that by holding option, you get this new option called copy context and tokens as path name. So I'm going to hit that button and then head back on over to Claude Code and hit paste. So now it has access to that specific image and it's referencing it for whatever I ask for it next. But in the IDE, it's so much easier because you have a file organizer and a user interface that we are so much more used to, especially when it comes to opening folders or selecting a file in a folder. That is the first part of an IDE. The second part is what is called the text editor, and it is the text editor that people like to call with the fancy term graphical user interface. Here is where you can actually see the code and also make edits to the code. The great thing is that now with AI, we don't even need to know how to read the code to make changes or edits to it, and we'll walk through that as well. The third part of the IDE is what's called the chat widget. So here is where you're actually talking with Claude Code in a much more user-friendly interface that you're used to. For example, if we look at this chat window, this looks exactly like the interface of using ChatGPT or Claude on your browser. If you think about using Claude in the terminal, it's so much more intimidating because everything lives in this text-based editor that is the terminal. That's the high-level overview of what are the differences between using the terminal versus an IDE, but let's actually do it in practice to really drive home what we just walked through. To do this, I need you guys to head back on over to the setup guide, head on over to phase 3, and here you'll see download Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code is a program developed by Microsoft way back in the day. So I'm going to hit this link. And for me, since I'm on Mac, I'm going to hit this icon here, which is download for Mac OS. And then you should have a download button pop up. And while that's downloading, keep in mind, if you remember the different ways to download and install software in your computer, we talked about the traditional way and then installing something via the terminal. Good news is that installing VS Code just uses the traditional way that we're all used to. So once you have it downloaded, install it on your computer, and then your screen should look a little bit something like this. Once you have opened Visual Studio Code, your screen should look something like this. So if we think about what we have in front of us, we can break it down by the infographic that we were looking at earlier. So on the left-hand side, we have the Explorer where we can open folders. In the middle, we have where the text editor would go. And then to the far right, we have where we actually chat with an AI agent. And if your view doesn't look like this, in the top right-hand corner, play and toggle with these different options, and you will be able to recreate the same exact view that I have here. So I have this primary sidebar toggled, and then I have the secondary sidebar toggled as well. Now, before we do anything, we need to actually install Claude Code into VS Code. And thankfully, that process is extremely straightforward as well. All you need to do is head on over to this left-hand panel, and this icon here represents extensions. And all you need to type in is Claude Code. And once you have typed in Claude Code, you will see a few different options. This next step is very, very important. You need to make sure that the Claude code that you install is the one that has a blue check mark from Anthropic. You do not want to be installing anything into VS Code unless you have confirmed its authenticity. Now, I clicked on Claude Code by Anthropic. I have confirmed that this is the verified publisher, and so now I can install it. Once you have it installed, then we'll be ready to actually use Claude Code in VS Code. From here, there are a few different ways to talk to Claude Code, so let's look at some examples. Method number one, which I personally prefer, is to hit this icon here, which opens a conversation with Claude. The second way is if you expand this far panel on the right a little bit, you'll see this option here next to chat, which is Claude Code. And this is where you can also talk to Claude Code as well. To be honest, the difference between this one here and this one here isn't really much anything. So it's just about personal preference. Let's actually start interacting with Claude and see what it can even do. I'm going to clean up our view a little bit. I'm going to X out of this tab, and then I'm going to X out of this tab here, and just focus on this specific view that we have in front of us. So I'm going to ask it, hey, Claude, what can you do? Now Claude is replying back to us a few different categories of work that it can help us with. Code and development, code-based navigation, terminal and Git, research and problem solving, file operations, planning. Once you actually dive into the details of some of these categories, you'll really start to get a feel of the power of Claude Code. But then for now, this is a good high-level overview of what you can actually use it for. This provides us a good opportunity to walk through some of the user interface of understanding and using Claude Code. So let's take a look at a few different details. The first one is that you'll see after my response here, there is a drop-down menu. And if I hit it, this is where you can actually see how and what types of steps Claude is taking to solution through your ask. For now, because my initial question was very basic, it didn't do or take much time to think. But once you start to give it more complex asks, you'll see it go through crazy amounts of steps and different ways that it's thinking about how to solve your problem or execute on the tasks that you gave it. And so that's the kind of agentic part, which is so cool. If we actually look down here, we have some interesting options that are really important to understand as well. If we click or if we read what this says here, it says ask before edits. What does that mean? If I click it, it says edit automatically. If I click it again, it says plan mode. And if I click it again, it says bypass permissions. This is actually a fundamental part of using Claude Code. So let's review what these four options actually mean so that you don't do anything crazy. Fundamentally, the four different options that we just looked at have to do with how much autonomy and control you want to give Claude Code. If you remember, Claude Code has access to different parts of your computer depending on how much you have given it or how much access you have taken away, meaning it can create files, but it can also delete files. So let's take a look at those four options. First, we have plan mode. Plan mode is essentially a read-only mode where Claude researches and outlines a strategy without making any actual changes to your computer. We have the ask before edits mode. This is where Claude pauses and asks for permission before every single file change. This is best for high-risk projects or beginners. The third option is edit automatically. And this is what, to be honest, I consider the balanced choice. And this means Claude modifies existing files freely, but still asks before creating new ones. It's basically the perfect middle ground for daily tasks. Lastly, we have bypass permissions. This is essentially the full Wild West mode where Claude creates, edits, and deletes files. It is the highest risk option, but you actually get the most speed using it. Lastly, we have bypass permissions, and this is essentially the full Wild West mode. This is where Claude can create, edit, and delete files. Basically, you give it complete autonomy, but what you get in return is the speed at which it executes your task. So, if we look at the slider here, this is a good visualization of the options. On the far right, we have the bypass permissions mode where Claude has an extreme amount of autonomy. And the result of that autonomy is that it can complete your task faster because it doesn't have to check in with you all the time. But if we take the slider to the far left, we have a much more safe option that doesn't run the risk of deleting something that was key or fundamental to what we're working on. But if we take the slider to the far left, we have the ask before edits mode. And here, this is where you don't run the risk of Claude deleting something key or fundamental to your project. But that safety comes with a trade off, which is it constantly has to check in with you about the changes that it's making, and you have to approve them manually. By approving everything manually, that considerably slows down the speed at which you're able to execute what you are working on. So all of it is a balance. The last part that I want to communicate to you guys is that there is a hotkey, which is Shift Tab. So if I go back to Claude Code and we focus on this section here, if I hit Shift Tab, then it's an easy way to change through the different options for what you are working on. Kind of just a fun little hotkey. If we look to the far right of these options, we have a few different other buttons that we can interact with. Let's focus on this backslash button. If I click it, you'll see a bunch of different options that we have. Firstly, if we focus on context, here is where we can easily point Claude to a file that we want it to reference. So if we think about the example of the terminal, rather than having to come in here and right click and find the path name, all I need to do is just select the file, hit open, and then Claude will now reference that file for what I'm doing. So if I hit open, then now it has this as a reference. There are some other parts that are important in this dropdown, but some of it isn't relevant to you yet. So I'll just focus on the ones that are most important if you're just starting out. This is the model section where you can switch between the different models that Claude uses. So I'm on default, and that's why I recommend you be as well. You can also look at your account and usage. You can also toggle between thinking or not thinking for the extended thinking functionality that Claude offers. And for the rest of the options that you see here, to be honest, if we went through it now, it would just confuse you. So we're going to save that for another video as you continue to get more comfortable with Claude Code. And that concludes today's video on setting up Claude Code, understanding what a terminal is, understanding what an IDE is, how to use Claude Code in an IDE. And now that you have everything set up, I'm going to be creating a lot more videos on how to actually use Claude Code for interesting use cases. So I hope you'll subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate it.